You're 26 years old, standing in your dream wedding dress, surrounded by everyone you love most in the world. The ceremony was perfect, the photos are beautiful, and you're finally married to the man who makes you believe in forever. Then, as you're cutting your wedding cake, your new mother-in-law stands up, taps her champagne glass, and announces to your entire reception that your marriage isn't real. That's exactly what happened to Rebecca Martinez on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But this story isn't just about one woman's wedding day disaster. It's about discovering strength you never knew you had, fighting for love when everyone tells you to give up, and proving that sometimes the most beautiful victories come from the most unexpected battles.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca Martinez had always been a planner. At 26, she had her life mapped out with the same precision she brought to her job as a project coordinator at Henderson Construction in downtown Phoenix. Her apartment in Scottsdale was organized, her career was on track, and her relationship with David Chen was the kind of steady, comfortable love that made perfect sense to everyone who knew them. They had met 3 years earlier at a company mixer. David worked in accounting for a tech startup, wore pressed khakis and button-down shirts, and had never missed a single one of their planned date nights. He was reliable, kind, and exactly the type of man Rebecca's parents had always hoped she'd find. Her mother, Carmen, would beam whenever David came to their monthly family dinners, whispering to Rebecca in the kitchen about what beautiful grandchildren they'd have someday. Rebecca's world was small but secure. She had her routine. Morning coffee at 6 a.m. sharp, gym 3 times a week, grocery shopping on Sundays, and video calls with her college roommate Sarah every Thursday evening. She lived within her means, saved 20% of her paycheck, and had a 5-year plan that included marriage, a house in the suburbs, and eventually starting a family. The proposal came exactly when Rebecca expected it would. David had been dropping hints for months about looking at rings, and on their 3-year anniversary, he took her to the same Italian restaurant where they'd had their first official date. The ring was a classic solitaire, exactly what she would have chosen herself. When he got down on one knee between the main course and dessert, Rebecca felt a warm satisfaction wash over her. Everything was going according to plan. The engagement period had been blissful in its predictability. They set the date for 18 months out, giving them plenty of time to save money and plan properly. Rebecca threw herself into wedding planning with her characteristic attention to detail. She created spreadsheets for the guest list, vendor comparisons, and timeline. She researched venues for 6 months before choosing the Desert Botanical Garden, with its stunning desert landscape and elegant event spaces. David's family had been welcoming, or at least Rebecca thought they had been. His parents, Linda and Robert Chen, lived in a sprawling ranch house in Paradise Valley. Linda Chen was a retired real estate agent who had built a successful career selling luxury homes to executives and celebrities. She was always impeccably dressed, with perfectly styled silver hair and an extensive collection of statement jewelry. Robert was quieter, a retired engineer who spent most family gatherings reading newspapers or working in his elaborate garage workshop. During their engagement, Linda had seemed genuinely excited about the wedding. She insisted on hosting the engagement party at their home, invited Rebecca to several mother-daughter lunches, and even offered to pay for the flowers as her contribution to the wedding. Rebecca had felt grateful to be welcomed so warmly into the Chen family, especially since David was an only child, and she knew how much his parents' approval meant to him. The only small tension had been around the guest list. Linda had wanted to invite several of her bridge club friends and some distant relatives from California, which would have pushed them over their planned budget. Rebecca had gently suggested keeping the celebration more intimate, focusing on close family and friends. Linda had seemed to accept this graciously, though Rebecca noticed she'd been a bit cooler in their interactions afterward. Rebecca's own family was thrilled about the marriage. Her parents, Carmen and Miguel Martinez, had immigrated from Mexico before Rebecca was born and had worked tirelessly to build a life in Phoenix. Miguel owned a small but successful landscaping business, and Carmen worked as a bilingual aide at an elementary school. They had always emphasized education and stability, and they saw David as proof that their daughter had achieved the American dream they'd worked so hard to provide her for. Rebecca's younger brother Carlos was 23 and finishing his business degree at Arizona State University. He'd been skeptical of David at first, calling him too vanilla and teasing Rebecca about dating someone who color-coordinated his socks. But even Carlos had come around, especially after David had helped him with his resume and connected him with some potential job opportunities.
The wedding planning had gone smoothly, almost suspiciously so. Every vendor Rebecca contacted was available on their date. The venue coordinator, Maria Gonzalez, was incredibly helpful and seemed to anticipate Rebecca's needs before she even voiced them. The dress shopping had been a fairy tale experience. The first dress she tried on at Kleinfeld Bridal's Phoenix location had been perfect, fitting her budget and her vision exactly. As the wedding day approached, Rebecca felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had created exactly the celebration she'd always envisioned. The guest list included 150 people, split evenly between both families. The menu featured both American classics and some of her grandmother's traditional Mexican recipes. The flowers were desert blooms in soft peach and coral tones that complemented the natural beauty of the botanical garden setting. The morning of the wedding, Rebecca had woken up in her childhood bedroom feeling calm and excited. Her bridesmaids, Sarah, her college roommate, her cousin Isabella, and David's longtime friend Michelle had arrived early for hair and makeup. The house had been filled with laughter and champagne, with her mother fluttering around, making sure everyone had everything they needed. Rebecca's dress was a classic A-line, with delicate lace sleeves and a cathedral train. She'd found her grandmother's pearl necklace in her jewelry box and wore it as her something old. Her something new was a pair of earrings David had given her the night before. Something borrowed was Sarah's vintage clutch, and something blue was a small ribbon sewn into the inside of her dress by her seamstress, Mrs. Patterson. The ceremony had been everything Rebecca had dreamed of. The desert setting was breathtaking in the late afternoon light, with towering saguaro cacti creating a dramatic backdrop. David had looked handsome in his charcoal gray suit, and when she walked down the aisle with her father, she had felt like she was floating. The officiant, Pastor Williams from the community church where David's family attended occasionally, had delivered a beautiful ceremony that managed to be both traditional and personal. David and Rebecca had written their own vows, and she had managed to get through hers without crying, promising to be David's partner in all of life's adventures and challenges. His vows had been sweet and earnest, talking about how she made him want to be a better man and how he couldn't wait to build a life together. The reception had started perfectly. The cocktail hour on the garden's terrace was magical, with string quartet music floating over conversations between old friends and new family connections. Rebecca had felt radiant as she moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and feeling genuinely happy about the future she and David were beginning together. Dinner had been served beautifully, and the speeches from her father and David's best man had been touching without being overly sentimental. Rebecca had been looking forward to the cake cutting, one of the last formal moments before the dancing would begin and the celebration would shift into pure joy. This was Rebecca's reality on March 15th, a young woman who had built a careful, planned life filled with people who loved her, marrying a good man in a beautiful ceremony that represented everything she'd worked toward. She had no idea that in less than an hour, everything she thought she knew about her life, her marriage, and the people around her would be turned completely upside down. Standing there in her perfect dress, surrounded by 150 guests who had come to celebrate her happiness, Rebecca Martinez believed she was living the beginning of her happily ever after. She had absolutely no reason to think otherwise. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The cake cutting was supposed to happen at 8:30.
right after dinner and the formal toasts. Rebecca and David stood behind the elegant 3-tier vanilla cake with buttercream roses, their hands intertwined on the silver knife handle. The photographer, Rebecca Martinez, no relation despite sharing Rebecca's maiden name, was positioning herself for the perfect shot when the sound of a champagne flute being tapped echoed across the reception hall. Everyone turned toward the head table, expecting perhaps another toast from a family member. Instead, Linda Chen stood gracefully, her emerald green mother-of-the-bride dress catching the soft garden lights. She looked radiant, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo, her smile bright as she surveyed the room full of guests. "Excuse me, everyone," Linda's voice carried clearly across the reception area. She had always been comfortable commanding attention. Years of selling million-dollar homes had given her a presence that filled any room. "I know we've heard some beautiful speeches tonight, but I have something important to share with all of you." Rebecca felt David's hands squeeze hers as they both looked toward his mother with curious smiles. This wasn't planned, but Linda had always been spontaneous. Just last month, she'd surprised them with engagement party decorations that transformed their simple dinner into an elaborate celebration. "As David's mother," Linda continued, her voice warm but somehow carrying an undercurrent Rebecca couldn't quite identify, "I've watched my son grow into the wonderful man he is today. And Rebecca, you've brought such joy to our family." She paused, looking directly at Rebecca with what appeared to be genuine affection. The guests were all attention now, wine glasses lowered, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Rebecca's mother, Carmen, was beaming from her seat at the parents' table, clearly expecting another touching family moment. However, Linda's tone shifted almost imperceptibly. "There's something everyone should know before we go any further with tonight's celebration." A chill ran down Rebecca's spine. Something in Linda's expression had changed. The warm smile was still there, but her eyes had gone cold, calculating. Rebecca had seen that exact look once before during a heated negotiation with their wedding planner over additional costs. "You see, I've recently discovered that Rebecca and David's marriage license was never properly filed with Maricopa County, which means, legally speaking, this beautiful ceremony we just witnessed isn't actually valid." The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Around them, the reception fell into stunned silence. She could feel her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. David's hand went limp in hers as he stared at his mother in complete shock. "Mom, what are you talking about?" David's voice cracked slightly, the question barely above a whisper but somehow audible in the sudden quiet. Linda's smile never wavered. "Oh, sweetie, I'm sure you think you do, but the county has no record of it. I spoke with a supervisor named Patricia Hendricks personally. She was very thorough in her search." The reception guests were beginning to murmur among themselves. She could see her parents' faces from across the room. Her mother looked confused and worried, while her father's expression was hardening with anger. Sarah, her maid of honor, had gone pale and was gripping her champagne glass so tightly her knuckles were white. "Why would you call the county?" David asked his mother, his voice gaining strength. "And why would you announce this here, now, like this?" "Because, darling, I thought everyone should know the truth before we waste any more time on this charade." Linda gestured elegantly around the beautiful reception. "I mean, look at all these people who came here thinking they were celebrating a real wedding." Rebecca felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. This wasn't just about a paperwork error. Linda's tone, her timing, the public humiliation of it all made it clear this was intentional. But why? Throughout their entire engagement, Linda had been supportive, involved, even generous. "Mrs. Chen," Rebecca's voice was steadier now, fueled by a growing anger. "Even if there was some kind of administrative error, which I don't believe there was, why would you handle this like this? Why not speak to us privately?" "Because, darling, I thought everyone should know the truth before we waste any more time on this charade." Linda gestured elegantly around the beautiful reception. "I mean, look at all these people who came here thinking they were celebrating a real wedding." That last comment hit Rebecca like a slap. The carefully constructed mask of concern was slipping, revealing something much uglier underneath. This wasn't about paperwork at all. David stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Mom, what is wrong with you? Even if there was some kind of problem with our license, this is our wedding day. Our friends and family are here. How could you do this?" "I'm trying to save you from making a mistake, David." Linda's voice took on the tone of a patient parent, explaining something to a stubborn child. "You're only 28. You have your whole life ahead of you. Why tie yourself down so young, especially when the paperwork isn't even legal?" Rebecca saw red. The months of careful politeness, of trying to win Linda's approval, of walking on eggshells around David's family, it all crystallized into clarity in that moment. This woman had never accepted her, had never intended to accept her, and had waited until the most public, humiliating moment possible to make that clear. "I need to see this supposed documentation," Rebecca announced loudly enough for the entire reception to hear, "because I know for a fact that we filed our marriage license properly, and I'm not going to stand here and let you humiliate my family and our guests with false accusations." The crowd stirred with interest. Some guests were beginning to pull out their phones, either to record the drama or to discreetly check social media. Rebecca could see her brother Carlos standing up from his table, his face dark with anger as he started walking toward the front of the reception. "Oh, poor thing." Linda's facade of sympathy was transparent now. "I understand this must be difficult to accept, but denial won't change the facts. I have the confirmation right here." She reached into her small beaded purse and pulled out what appeared to be an official-looking document. Rebecca snatched the paper from Linda's perfectly manicured hands before David could react. It was a printout of an email from the Maricopa County Clerk's office, dated the previous day. The email was brief and to the point. "After conducting a thorough search of our records, we have found no marriage license application for Rebecca Martinez and David Chen with a ceremony date of March 15th, 2024. But something was wrong with the document. Rebecca had worked with enough official paperwork in her job to know how these things typically looked, and this email seemed off somehow. The formatting was strange, the signature line looked generic, and most importantly, the email address it came from ended in @gmail.com rather than an official domain. "This is fake," Rebecca announced, holding the paper up for everyone to see. "This didn't come from the county clerk's office. It came from a Gmail account." Linda's confident expression flickered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Don't be ridiculous. That's just how they send confirmation emails these days. Not everything comes from official domains." But Rebecca's mind was racing now, pieces clicking into place. Linda's insistence on being involved in the wedding planning, her questions about vendors and timelines, her offer to help with some of the paperwork when Rebecca had been overwhelmed with work deadlines, the way she had inserted herself into conversations with the wedding planner and even the officiant. "You did something to our marriage license, didn't you?" Rebecca's voice was quiet, but carried clearly in the stunned silence of the reception hall. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. David was staring at his mother with an expression of dawning horror, while Linda's mask finally slipped completely, revealing a cold fury underneath. "How dare you accuse me of—" "No," Rebecca said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "How dare you? How dare you wait until our wedding day in front of all our family and friends to try to destroy our marriage with lies and fake documents? What kind of person does that to their own son?" The reception had erupted into chaos now. Guests were talking loudly amongst themselves, some standing to get a better view of the confrontation. Rebecca could see her brother Carlos standing up from his table, his face dark with anger, as he started walking toward the front of the reception. But in that moment of chaos and humiliation, something unexpected happened. Instead of crumbling under the weight of Linda's attack, instead of dissolving into tears or running away in embarrassment, Rebecca felt something she'd never experienced before: absolute clarity about who she was and what she was willing to fight for. Standing there, in her wedding dress, holding a fake document that was meant to destroy the happiest day of her life, Rebecca Martinez realized that her carefully planned, predictable world had just been shattered. But instead of feeling devastated, she felt liberated. For the first time in her life, she was about to stop trying to please everyone and start fighting for herself.
The Monday morning after the wedding that wasn't quite a wedding, Rebecca sat in her car outside the Maricopa County Clerk's office at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before they opened. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours all night, her mind racing with questions and her heart pounding with a mixture of rage and determination she'd never felt before. The reception had ended in chaos. After Rebecca's accusation that Linda had sabotaged their marriage license, the evening had devolved into a series of heated arguments and confused conversations. David had stood frozen between his mother and his new wife, unable to process what was happening. Rebecca's father, Miguel, had finally stepped in and announced that everyone should go home and sort this out in the morning when emotions weren't running so high. But Rebecca couldn't wait until morning to start fighting back. She'd spent most of Sunday night in her childhood bedroom, still wearing her wedding dress, going through every piece of paperwork related to their marriage license. She had copies of everything: their application, the receipt for the filing fee, even a photo she'd taken of them at the clerk's office the day they'd submitted everything. Now, armed with a manila folder containing all her documentation and wearing the most professional outfit she owned, a navy blue suit she typically reserved for important client meetings, Rebecca was ready to get answers. At exactly 8 a.m., she was the first person through the doors of the county building. The clerk's office was on the second floor, a sterile government space with fluorescent lighting and worn carpet. Behind the counter sat a middle-aged woman with graying hair and kind eyes, wearing a name tag that read Patricia Hendricks, Supervisor. Rebecca's heart skipped. This was the woman Linda claimed to have spoken with. "Good morning," Rebecca said, approaching the counter with her folder clutched tightly in her hands. "I need to check on the status of my marriage license. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and my fiancé, my husband, is David Chen. We were supposed to be married on March 15th. Patricia looked up from her computer screen with a professional smile. "Of course, let me look that up for you." She typed quickly, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. After a moment, she frowned and typed some more. "I'm not seeing anything under those names for a March 15th ceremony date," Patricia said, her frown deepening. "Let me try a few different search parameters." Rebecca's stomach dropped, but she forced herself to stay calm. "That's impossible. We filed our application on February 1st. I have all the paperwork right here." She opened her folder and spread the documents across the counter. Patricia examined the papers carefully, her expression growing more puzzled by the moment. "These look legitimate," she said slowly. "You have the application, the receipt for the filing fee, even a photo she'd taken of them at the clerk's office the day they'd submitted everything. Let me check our system more thoroughly." For the next 20 minutes, Patricia searched every database available to her. She called over 2 other clerks, had them run searches using different criteria, and even contacted the IT department to make sure there wasn't a system error. "Mrs. Chen," Patricia finally said, using Rebecca's married name without thinking about it, "I'm going to be completely honest with you. Your paperwork is absolutely legitimate. You filed correctly, paid the proper fees, and should have a valid marriage license in our system. But somehow your application has been deleted from our records." "Deleted?" Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "It's not just missing or misfiled. According to the system logs, your application was accessed and removed from our database on March 13th at 3:47 p.m., 2 days before your wedding." Rebecca felt the room spinning around her. "Can you see who accessed it?" Patricia hesitated, glancing around the office nervously. "I probably shouldn't share this information, but given the circumstances, the access came from an external terminal. Someone with authorized access logged in and specifically deleted your record." who has that kind of access? Very few people, mainly supervisory staff, some IT personnel, and... Patricia paused, checking her screen again. A few approved vendors who help us with data entry and processing during busy seasons. What kind of vendors? Wedding planners mostly. High-volume coordinators who help couples with the paperwork when we're understaffed. They have limited access to input data and make corrections, but deleting records requires supervisory-level authorization. Would Linda Chen be on that list? Patricia's eyes widened. I can't give out specific vendor information, but off the record, Mrs. Chen has been an approved vendor for about 8 years. She helps high-end clients navigate the system, handles group applications for destination weddings, that sort of thing. Rebecca felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Linda hadn't just discovered that their marriage license was missing, she'd been the one to delete it. The woman had used her professional access to sabotage her own son's wedding. What can we do to fix this? Rebecca asked, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. Well, the good news is that we can absolutely prove what happened. The system logs are permanent, and we have all your original documentation. I can reinstate your marriage license immediately and backdate it to your original filing date. Your marriage will be completely legal and valid. And the bad news? Patricia sighed. The bad news is that what Linda did is a felony. Unauthorized deletion of government records, fraud, abuse of vendor privileges. She could face serious criminal charges. Are you prepared to pursue that? Rebecca stared at the documents spread across the counter. 24 hours ago, her biggest worry was whether the flowers would hold up in the desert heat. Now, she was contemplating pressing felony charges against her mother-in-law.
Can I think about it? For now, I just want our marriage license reinstated. Absolutely. Give me about an hour to process everything, and you'll have a certified copy of your marriage license with yesterday's date as your official marriage date. Rebecca left the clerk's office with mixed emotions. She felt vindicated. She'd been right about the sabotage, and her marriage was legally valid. But she also felt overwhelmed by the implications. Linda hadn't just made a mistake or acted impulsively. She'd planned this attack for weeks, maybe months. Her phone had been buzzing constantly since she'd left the house that morning. Text messages from worried friends, missed calls from family members, and several voicemails from David that she wasn't ready to listen to yet. The hardest part was that she didn't know where David stood in all of this. At the reception, he'd seemed as shocked as everyone else, but he'd also been unable to defend her when it mattered most. Rebecca drove to her office at Henderson Construction, hoping that focusing on work would help her process everything. But as soon as she walked through the doors, she realized that the drama had followed her there, too. Her boss, Jennifer Walsh, intercepted her before she could reach her desk. "Rebecca, can I see you in my office for a minute?" Jennifer was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had built Henderson Construction from a small family business into one of Phoenix's most successful commercial contractors. She was also someone Rebecca respected enormously and hoped to emulate professionally. "I heard about what happened at your wedding. Are you okay?" Rebecca had prepared herself for this conversation. "There was some confusion about our marriage license, but it's all sorted out now. David and I are legally married." Jennifer nodded, but her expression remained serious. "I'm glad to hear that. But I have to ask, is there going to be ongoing family drama? Because I need to know if this is going to affect your work or become a distraction." The question hit Rebecca harder than she'd expected. She'd always prided herself on keeping her personal and professional lives completely separate. The idea that Linda's actions might impact her career was infuriating. "I understand your concern," Rebecca said carefully. "But this was an isolated incident, and it won't happen again." "Good, because you know how much I value you here, Rebecca. You're one of our most reliable coordinators, and I've been planning to discuss some new opportunities with you. But I need to know that you can handle whatever personal issues you're dealing with without bringing them into the office." After the meeting, Rebecca sat at her desk trying to focus on project timelines and vendor contracts, but her mind kept wandering back to Patricia Hendricks's revelation. Linda had used her professional access to sabotage the marriage. She'd planned the whole thing, waited until the most public moment possible, and then tried to humiliate Rebecca in front of everyone they cared about. Around noon, her phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and after a moment of hesitation, Rebecca answered. "Becca, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all morning. We need to talk." "I went to the county clerk's office. Our marriage license was deleted from their system 2 days before the wedding. Your mom did it. She used her vendor access to sabotage our wedding." Silence stretched across the phone line for nearly 30 seconds. "That's impossible," David finally said. "My mom wouldn't do something like that. There has to be another explanation." And there it was, the resistance Rebecca had been dreading, but somehow expecting. Even faced with concrete evidence, David was choosing to protect his mother rather than believe his wife. "David, I have documentation. The county has system logs showing exactly when and how the record was deleted. Your mom has been an approved vendor for 8 years. She had the access and the knowledge to do exactly what she did." "But why would she do that? She's been nothing but supportive of our relationship." Rebecca felt a familiar frustration rising. This was exactly the kind of conflict she'd spent her entire life trying to avoid. But avoiding it hadn't protected her. It had just made her an easier target. "You'll have to ask her that. But I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen just to keep the peace. Your mom tried to destroy our marriage, and I'm not going to smile and act like everything is fine." "Becca, please. Can't we just focus on the fact that we're married and move past this? I love you, and I want to start our life together. All this drama with my mom is just going to make everything harder." Rebecca closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 26 years of always being the peacekeeper, always being the one to compromise, always being the one to let things go for the sake of harmony. "No, David, we can't just move past this. Not this time."
Rebecca stared at her phone for a long moment after hanging up with David, feeling more alone than she had at any point in her adult life. Her husband of less than 48 hours was asking her to ignore deliberate sabotage from his mother, and she was beginning to realize that this fight wasn't going to be as simple as proving she was right about the marriage license. That evening, she drove to her parents' house in South Phoenix, the modest ranch-style home where she'd grown up. The neighborhood was a mix of working-class families, many of them immigrants like her parents, who had built comfortable lives through sheer determination and hard work. As she pulled into the driveway behind her father's work truck, Rebecca felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. This was home, the one place where people would always be on her side. Her mother, Carmen, met her at the door with a fierce hug and immediately began fussing over whether Rebecca had eaten anything that day. McGill was in the living room, still wearing his work clothes, but with his boots neatly lined up by the door. When he saw Rebecca, his weathered face darkened with concern. "Mija, sit down and tell us everything," he said in Spanish, patting the couch beside him. "What happened at that office today?" Rebecca explained everything she learned at the county clerk's office, showing them the documentation Patricia Hendricks had provided. As she spoke, she watched her parents' expressions shift from confusion to shock to fury. "That woman planned this," Carmen said, her voice tight with anger. "She waited until your wedding day in front of all our family and friends to humiliate you. What kind of person does that to their own son's wife?" Miguel was quieter, but his anger ran deeper. "And David, what does he say about his mother's lies?" "He doesn't want to believe it," Rebecca admitted. "He thinks I should just let it go and move on." "Let it go?" Miguel's voice was dangerously quiet. "She attacked our family's honor. She tried to make it look like you were lying, like we raised a daughter who would fake a marriage. This isn't something you let go." Carmen reached across the table and took Rebecca's hands. "Mija, your whole life you've tried to keep everyone happy. You've always been the one to compromise, to smooth things over, but some things you don't compromise on. Your marriage, your dignity, your family. These things are worth fighting for." But what if fighting makes everything worse? Rebecca asked. What if I lose David over this? Miguel leaned forward. Rebecca, listen to me. If David chooses his mother over his wife when his mother is clearly in the wrong, then he was never going to be the husband you deserve anyway. A real man protects his family. He doesn't ask his wife to accept being attacked. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Carmen went to answer it and returned with Carlos, Rebecca's younger brother, who looked like he'd run directly from his apartment to their parents' house. I've been thinking about this all day, Carlos said without preamble, and I think Linda Chen is more dangerous than any of us realized. What do you mean? Rebecca asked. Carlos pulled out his laptop and set it on the coffee table. I did some research on her business. She's not just some retired real estate agent who helps with wedding paperwork occasionally. She runs a full-service wedding consultation company called Desert Dreams Events. She has contracts with venues, vendors, even government offices. He turned the laptop screen toward them, showing Linda's professional website. The homepage featured glamorous photos of desert weddings and a professional headshot of Linda looking polished and authoritative. Look at her client testimonials, Carlos continued, scrolling down the page. She specializes in managing difficult dynamics and ensuring her clients get the weddings they truly deserve. I think she's done this before. Done what before? Rebecca asked. Interfered with weddings she didn't approve of. Look at this review from 2 years ago. This couple thanks her for helping them see that their relationship wasn't right for marriage and for preventing a terrible mistake before it was too late. Carmen read over Rebecca's shoulder. She sabotaged other people's weddings? It looks like it, Carlos said grimly. And there's more. I found her business license and vendor registrations. She has access to wedding planning systems for half the venues in Phoenix, plus her government vendor status. She could interfere with almost any aspect of a wedding if she wanted to. Miguel stood up and began pacing, a sure sign that he was thinking hard about something. This changes everything. This isn't just a family dispute. This is a woman who uses her business to destroy marriages she doesn't approve of. We need to document everything, Rebecca said, her mind racing. If she's done this to other couples, there might be a pattern. Maybe other people who would be willing to speak up. Carlos nodded enthusiastically. I can help with that. I've got some friends who work in tech. They can help us dig deeper into her business records, find other couples who might have been affected. And I know someone who might be able to help too, Carmen added quietly. Maria Gonzalez, your wedding coordinator? She called me this afternoon. She wanted to make sure you were okay after what happened. Rebecca remembered Maria, the incredibly helpful venue coordinator who had made everything run so smoothly. What did she say? She said Linda Chen had been asking a lot of questions about your wedding planning over the past few months. Maria thought she was just being an involved mother-in-law, but now she's wondering if there was something else going on. I should talk to her, Rebecca said. If Linda was gathering information about our wedding plans, Maria might have noticed other suspicious behavior. The next morning, Rebecca met Maria Gonzalez at a coffee shop near the Desert Botanical Garden. Maria was a petite woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the efficient demeanor of someone who had coordinated hundreds of weddings. She looked genuinely distressed as Rebecca approached her table.
Rebecca, I am so sorry about what happened at your reception, Maria said immediately. In 15 years of wedding coordination, I have never seen anything like that. It was cruel and unnecessary. Thank you, Rebecca said, sitting down across from her. My mother mentioned that you'd noticed Linda asking questions about our wedding plans. Maria nodded, her expression troubled. At first, I thought it was sweet. She seemed so involved, so excited about your wedding. But looking back, some of her questions were strange. Strange how? She asked very specific things about your paperwork timeline, about which vendors you were using, about your guest list. She even asked me for copies of some contracts, saying she wanted to understand the process better for future reference. Maria paused, stirring her coffee nervously. I gave them to her because she said she was family, but now I'm wondering if she was looking for ways to cause problems. Rebecca felt her anger building again. What kind of contracts? Your venue contract, the catering agreement, even your photography contract. She said she wanted to recommend your vendors to other clients, but Maria trailed off, shaking her head. Rebecca, there's something else. Linda contacted me 3 days before your wedding. She said there might be some issues with your marriage license and asked if we had contingency plans for ceremonies that couldn't be legally completed. She was planning this weeks in advance, Rebecca said, the pieces falling into place. She wasn't just reacting to something she discovered. She was setting up the sabotage. I think so, Maria agreed. And I feel terrible about it. If I had realized what she was doing, I would have warned you immediately. It's not your fault, Rebecca assured her. You had no reason to suspect a mother-in-law would sabotage her own wedding son. Maria leaned forward. Rebecca, I want to help. If you decide to pursue legal action, or if you need someone to testify about what Linda did, I'll do whatever I can. What she did was unconscionable. After leaving the coffee shop, Rebecca felt like she was finally building a case. She had documentation from the county clerk's office, research from Carlos about Linda's business practices, and now testimony from Maria about the premeditated nature of the sabotage. But she also knew that her strongest ally needed to be David, and so far, he remained reluctant to believe his mother was capable of such calculated cruelty. That afternoon, she decided to take a different approach. Instead of confronting David with more evidence, she invited him to lunch at their favorite restaurant, the same place where they'd had their first date 3 years earlier. David looked exhausted when he arrived, his usually neat appearance slightly disheveled. They ordered their food in relative silence before finally Rebecca spoke. I want to save our marriage, she said simply, but I need you to help me understand something. If the roles were reversed, if my mother had sabotaged our wedding and humiliated your family in public, what would you want me to do? David stared at his sandwich for a long moment. That's different. Your parents would never do something like that. But if they did, if my mother used her professional access to delete our marriage license, then publicly humiliated you at our wedding reception, what would you want from me as your wife? I'd want you to support me, David said quietly. I'd want you to choose our marriage over keeping peace with your family. Then you understand why I can't just let this go. I'm not asking you to cut off your mother or hate her. I'm asking you to acknowledge what she did was wrong and support me in making sure it doesn't happen again. David looked up at her, and for the first time since the wedding, she saw uncertainty in his eyes instead of just defensiveness. I love my mom, Becca. She's always been there for me, always protected me. It's hard for me to believe she would deliberately hurt me like this. I know, but maybe the question isn't whether she would hurt you. Maybe the question is whether she sees me as a threat to your relationship with you, and if she's willing to hurt me to eliminate that threat. For the first time since their phone call the previous morning, David was really listening. 3 days after her lunch with David, Rebecca thought she was finally making progress. David had agreed to have a conversation with his mother about what happened, and he'd even admitted that some of Linda's behavior leading up to the wedding had been questionable. Rebecca had spent the morning organizing all the evidence she'd gathered, feeling cautiously optimistic that she and David could present a united front. That optimism shattered at 2:17 p.m. when her phone rang at work. Mrs. Chen? The voice on the other end was professional but tense. This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the Phoenix Police Department. I need to speak with you about some serious allegations that have been made against you. Rebecca's blood ran cold. Allegations? What kind of allegations? Ma'am, I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can you come down to the station this afternoon? An hour later, Rebecca sat in a sterile interview room across from Detective Morrison, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. Between them on the metal table was a manila folder that Detective Morrison opened with deliberate precision. Mrs. Chen, we've received a complaint alleging that you've been harassing and threatening Mrs. Linda Chen, your mother-in-law, and that you've made false accusations against her involving fraud and government document tampering. Rebecca stared at the detective in complete shock. That's not true. I haven't threatened anyone. I've been investigating what she did to our marriage license. Detective Morrison pulled out several documents from the folder. According to the complaint filed by Mrs. Chen, you've been conducting what she calls a malicious campaign to damage her reputation and her business.
She's provided evidence of what she claims are threatening phone calls, harassment of her business associates, and attempts to damage her professional relationships. I never called her. I haven't spoken to Linda since our wedding reception. What about calls to her business associates, her wedding vendors, clients? Rebecca felt trapped. I talked to Maria Gonzalez, our wedding coordinator, because she reached out to me, and my brother did some research into Linda's business, but that was just looking at public information. Detective Morrison made notes on a pad. Mrs. Chen has also alleged that you've created fake documents to support false claims about marriage license fraud. She says you're trying to frame her for crimes she didn't commit. The room felt like it was spinning. Rebecca gripped the edge of the table, trying to process what was happening. The documents aren't fake. I got them directly from the Maricopa County Clerk's office. Patricia Hendricks can verify everything. We'll be following up on that, but Mrs. Chen has presented what appears to be evidence that you falsified county documents. She's provided her own documentation showing that your marriage license was never filed properly due to incomplete paperwork on your part, not any action on hers. That's impossible, Rebecca said, her voice rising. I have proof that she deleted our marriage license from the county system. Detective Morrison slid a document across the table. This is a sworn affidavit from Mrs. Chen stating that she discovered errors in your marriage license application when she was helping with wedding preparations. According to this, she tried to contact you and your fiancé to correct the problems, but you refused to address them. She says she only mentioned it publicly at the wedding reception because she was concerned about the legal implications of proceeding with an invalid ceremony. Rebecca read the affidavit with growing horror. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, painting Linda as a concerned mother-in-law trying to prevent legal complications, and Rebecca as an unstable young woman who became vindictive when her mistakes were exposed. This is all lies, Rebecca said desperately. She's twisting everything around. Mrs. Chen has also provided character references from several prominent members of the Phoenix business community, including her former clients and colleagues in the real estate industry. They describe her as ethical, professional, and someone who would never engage in the kind of behavior you've accused her of. Detective Morrison pulled out more documents. On the other hand, we've been told that you have a history of workplace conflicts and that your employer has expressed concerns about your ability to handle personal stress professionally. Rebecca's heart sank. She thought about her conversation with Jennifer Walsh, her boss, who had questioned whether personal drama would affect her work performance. Somehow, Linda had found out about that conversation and was using it against her. There's more, Detective Morrison continued. Mrs. Chen has filed for a restraining order against you, claiming that your harassment campaign has caused her significant emotional distress and is threatening her livelihood. She's also indicated that she may pursue civil charges for defamation and business interference. Rebecca felt like she was drowning. In the span of an hour, she'd gone from being the victim of sabotage to being portrayed as an unstable woman conducting a harassment campaign against her innocent mother-in-law.
I want to call my husband, Rebecca said. You're not under arrest, Mrs. Chen. You're free to leave at any time, but I strongly suggest that you cease any further contact with Mrs. Linda Chen or her business associates while we investigate these allegations. Rebecca left the police station feeling completely defeated. Linda had outmaneuvered her at every turn, using her connections and professional reputation to flip the entire narrative. Rebecca was no longer the wronged party seeking justice. She was the villain in the story. She sat in her car in the police station parking lot and called David with shaking hands. "Becca, thank God." David's voice was strained. "I just got off the phone with my mom. She told me you've been calling her business contacts, threatening her, trying to destroy her reputation. What's going on?" "David, she's lying. I never threatened her. She filed a police complaint against me saying I'm harassing her. She's trying to make it look like I'm the one who—" My mom is in tears.
She showed me all these documents about our marriage license. Becca, it looks like there really were problems with our application that we didn't handle properly." Rebecca felt her world collapsing. "David, you can't believe this. You know me. You know I would never threaten anyone or make false accusations." "I don't know what to believe anymore," David said quietly. "My mom has documentation, witness statements, professional references. She's filed official complaints with the police and the courts. Why would she do all that if she was the one in the wrong?" "Because she's smart and she's connected and she knows how to manipulate the system," Rebecca said desperately. "David, please, you have to believe me." "I need some time to think," David said. "Maybe we both need to step back from the situation before it gets any worse." "Step back? David, we're married. We're supposed to be starting our life together." "Are we married, though?" David's question hit her like a physical blow. "I mean, really married? Because right now it feels like everything about our wedding was fake or wrong or manipulated somehow." After David hung up, Rebecca drove aimlessly around Phoenix for 2 hours trying to process what had happened. Linda hadn't just defended herself against Rebecca's accusations. She'd launched a full-scale counterattack designed to destroy Rebecca's credibility and isolate her from any support. When she finally made it home to the apartment she and David shared, she found a note on the kitchen table. David's handwriting was neat and careful, the same way he approached everything in his life. "Becca, I think we need some space while we figure out what's true and what isn't. I'm going to stay at my parents' house for a while. I love you, but I can't handle all this conflict and drama. Maybe when things calm down, we can work this out. David." Rebecca sank into their kitchen chair, still wearing the professional suit she'd put on that morning when she thought her biggest challenge would be organizing evidence. Now her husband had moved out. The police were investigating her for harassment, and her mother-in-law had successfully painted her as an unstable woman conducting a vendetta. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop this harassment campaign immediately, or I will pursue every legal option available to protect myself and my family. You have already caused enough damage. Linda Chen." Rebecca stared at the message, realizing that Linda had probably sent it specifically to create more evidence of contact that could be used against her in the restraining order hearing. She was trapped. Every move she made to defend herself could be twisted into evidence of harassment. Every piece of evidence she tried to present could be portrayed as falsification. Every attempt to tell her side of the story could be portrayed as part of a malicious campaign. Linda Chen had decades of experience, professional connections, and a sterling reputation in the Phoenix business community. Rebecca was a 26-year-old project coordinator with no legal experience and no understanding of how to fight someone who was willing to use the entire system against her. As she sat alone in her empty apartment, surrounded by wedding gifts that now felt like reminders of her humiliation, Rebecca began to wonder if Linda might actually win. Rebecca spent the next 4 days in a fog of despair. She'd taken sick leave from work, unable to concentrate on anything beyond the legal nightmare consuming her life. Her apartment felt hollow without David's presence. His coffee mug missing from the sink, his side of the bed perfectly made, his favorite books gone from the nightstand. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, and Rebecca had been unable to find an attorney willing to take her case on short notice. Most of the family law attorneys she'd contacted had either been too expensive or had cited conflicts of interest. Apparently, Linda's connections in the Phoenix legal community ran deeper than Rebecca had realized. She was sitting on her couch Friday evening, surrounded by legal documents she barely understood, when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her brother Carlos. "Rebecca, you need to get over here right now," Carlos said without preamble. His voice was electric with excitement. "I found something. Something big." 20 minutes later, Rebecca was in Carlos's small apartment near ASU, where his computer setup looked like mission control for a space launch. Multiple monitors displayed spreadsheets, websites, and what appeared to be database searches. I've been digging deeper into Linda's business records, Carlos explained, gesturing to his screens, and I found something that changes everything. Look at this. He pulled up a database showing business licenses and vendor registrations. Remember how I told you Linda has access to government wedding systems as an approved vendor? Well, I started looking at when she got that access and how she's used it over the years. Carlos, I can't have you doing anything that might be considered hacking or... It's all public records, Carlos interrupted. Business licenses, court filings, complaints to the Better Business Bureau, all completely legal to access. But here's the thing, Linda's vendor access was supposed to be revoked 18 months ago. Rebecca leaned closer to the screen. What do you mean revoked? She was caught falsifying marriage license applications for 3 different couples in 2022. The county clerk's office suspended her vendor privileges and was supposed to remove her system access permanently. Rebecca's heart started racing. But she still had access to delete our marriage license. Exactly, which means she's been operating with unauthorized access for over a year. Every time she's logged into the county system, she's been committing a felony. Carlos clicked to another screen showing a series of dates and timestamps. But it gets better. I cross-referenced her unauthorized system access with complaints filed against her business. Look at this pattern. The screen showed a timeline stretching back 2 years. Every few months, there were clusters of activity. Unauthorized access to county systems, followed within days by couples filing complaints about their weddings being disrupted or their marriage licenses having problems. She's been doing this to multiple couples, Rebecca whispered. This is her business model. It's even worse than that, Carlos said grimly. Look at the demographics of the couples she's targeted. He pulled up another spreadsheet, this one showing names, ages, and brief descriptions of the affected couples. The pattern was immediately obvious. In every case, the brides were young, from working class or immigrant families, and marrying into wealthier, more established families. She targets couples where she thinks the bride isn't good enough for the groom's family, Rebecca said, feeling sick. And she uses her business connections to sabotage their weddings. But here's the smoking gun, Carlos said, clicking to a final screen. I found her real business model buried in some partnership agreements she filed with the state. Desert Dreams Events isn't just a wedding planning business, it's a family protection consultation service. She literally advertises her ability to intervene in unsuitable matches before they become permanent mistakes. Rebecca stared at the screen in disbelief. The marketing language was coded, but clear. Linda Chen was running a business that specialized in breaking up marriages and relationships that wealthy families disapproved of. There's more, Carlos continued, clicking to another screen. I found correspondence between Linda and some of her clients. Look at this email from 6 months ago. The email was from a woman named Patricia Whitmore, thanking Linda for her discreet intervention in preventing her son's marriage to a completely inappropriate girl from the wrong background. The email went on to praise Linda's elegant solution and her ability to make it look like natural relationship problems rather than family interference. This is a conspiracy, Rebecca said, her voice barely audible. She's been paid to destroy marriages. And there's a paper trail proving all of it, Carlos said. Financial records showing payments from wealthy families to Linda's consulting business, system logs showing her unauthorized access to county databases, and most importantly, a pattern of targeting that's been going on for years. Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Hope. This wasn't just about her marriage anymore. This was about a systematic fraud operation that had destroyed multiple couples' lives. We need to get this to the police, she said. Already ahead of you, Carlos grinned. But not the Phoenix PD. They're too connected to Linda's network. I reached out to the Arizona Attorney General's office. They have a financial crimes unit that specializes in exactly this kind of fraud. Will they listen to us? They'll listen to the evidence. And Rebecca, this evidence is bulletproof. System logs don't lie. Financial records don't lie, and the pattern is so clear that even Linda's connections won't be able to explain it away.
Rebecca spent the weekend working with Carlos to organize their findings into a comprehensive package for the Attorney General's office. They created timelines, cross-referenced financial records with victim complaints, and documented Linda's unauthorized system access going back 18 months. But the most powerful evidence came from an unexpected source. On Sunday afternoon, Rebecca's phone rang. The caller ID showed a local number she didn't recognize. "Is this Rebecca Martinez Chen?" The voice was tentative, nervous. "Yes, this is Rebecca. My name is Jessica Thompson. I heard about what happened at your wedding. I think Linda Chen did something similar to me and my husband 2 years ago." Rebecca's pulse quickened. "Can you tell me what happened?" "We were supposed to get married in April 2022 at the Phoenician Resort. Everything was planned perfectly, just like yours was. But 3 days before our wedding, we found out our venue contract had been canceled due to what they said were problems with our deposit check." "Problems with your deposit check?" "The venue said our check had bounced, but we knew that was impossible. We had plenty of money in our account. When we went to the bank, they showed us that someone had accessed our account and moved money around to make it look like we were overdrawn when the venue tried to process the payment." Rebecca's pulse quickened. "How is that possible?" "We never figured it out at the time. The bank said there was no evidence of external fraud, that it looked like we had made the transfers ourselves. Our families blamed each other for the financial mess and the stress of it all. Well, we ended up calling off the wedding entirely." "What does this have to do with Linda Chen?" "My ex-fiance's mother had hired Linda as a wedding consultant about 6 months before our wedding. Linda had been asking lots of questions about our finances, our vendors, our guest list. At the time, we thought she was just being thorough. But after I heard about what she did to you, I started wondering." "Do you have any proof that Linda was involved?" "I kept all the paperwork from our wedding planning. Bank statements, vendor contracts, email correspondence. If you think it would help your case, I'd be willing to share everything." By Sunday evening, Rebecca and Carlos had spoken with Jessica and 2 other couples who had experienced similar mysterious problems with their weddings after working with Linda Chen. In every case, the bride was from a modest background, marrying into a wealthy family. In every case, Linda had been hired as a consultant by the groom's family. And in every case, technical problems had emerged that made the families blame each other and ultimately led to canceled weddings or annulled marriages. "She's been running this scam for years," Rebecca said as she and Carlos compiled the additional evidence. "And she's gotten away with it because she makes it look like natural problems instead of sabotage. Until now, because this time she got sloppy. She used her unauthorized system access in a way that left digital fingerprints, and she targeted someone who was smart enough and stubborn enough to fight back." Monday morning, Rebecca walked into the Arizona Attorney General's office with 3 binders full of evidence, testimony from 4 different couples, and documentation of a fraud scheme that had been operating for over 2 years. The prosecutor who met with her was a sharp-eyed woman named Amanda Richards, who specialized in white-collar crime. As Rebecca laid out the evidence, she watched Amanda's expression shift from polite interest to focused attention to barely contained excitement. "Miss Martinez," Amanda said when Rebecca finished her presentation, "what you've uncovered here isn't just fraud, it's racketeering. Linda Chen has been running an organized criminal enterprise designed to defraud couples and manipulate government systems. This is a federal case." For the first time in over a week, Rebecca smiled. "Does this mean you'll investigate?" "Miss Martinez, by Thursday morning, Linda Chen is going to be under federal indictment for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. And that restraining order hearing she's been looking forward to, it's going to become very interesting when the judge learns that the person seeking protection is actually the one facing federal charges." Rebecca left the Attorney General's office feeling like she could breathe again for the first time since her wedding day. Linda Chen had underestimated her opponent. She assumed that Rebecca was just another young woman who could be intimidated and isolated into submission. She was about to learn how wrong she had been. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of desert sunrise that makes Phoenix shimmer like a jewel.
golden light cascading over the mountains, the air crisp and clean before the day's heat settles in. Rebecca stood on her apartment balcony with her coffee, watching the sunrise and feeling cautiously hopeful for the first time in 2 weeks. At 8 a.m. sharp, her phone rang. Amanda Richards, the federal prosecutor, sounded energized and focused. "Rebecca, we've executed search warrants on Linda Chen's business, her home, and her computer systems. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit has been working around the clock, and what we've found exceeds even our expectations." Rebecca gripped her coffee mug tighter. "What did you find?" "Evidence of fraud schemes targeting at least 17 couples over the past 3 years, with total financial damages exceeding $2.3 million. Bank records showing payments from wealthy families specifically for relationship intervention services, and most damning of all, detailed files Linda kept on each target couple, including psychological profiles, financial vulnerabilities, and strategic plans for sabotage." Rebecca felt her legs go weak. She had a file on me and David? A comprehensive one. Photos from your social media, financial information gathered from your credit checks during the wedding planning process, detailed notes about your family background, and a specific strategy for turning David against you by making you appear unstable and vindictive. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. Linda hadn't just disliked Rebecca. She'd studied her like a military strategist studies an enemy, looking for weaknesses to exploit. "There's more," Amanda continued. "Linda's been working with a network of accomplices, venue coordinators who would create technical problems, banking contacts who could access account information, even a few corrupt officials in various government offices. This wasn't just one woman operating alone. This was an organized criminal enterprise." What happens now? Linda Chen was arrested at 6 a.m. this morning on federal charges including racketeering, fraud, conspiracy, and unauthorized access to government computer systems. She's currently being processed at the federal courthouse downtown. Her arraignment is scheduled for this afternoon. Rebecca closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of vindication and exhaustion wash over her. After 2 weeks of being painted as a vindictive harasser, the truth was finally coming to light. "What about the restraining order hearing?" Rebecca asked. "Canceled. It's hard to claim you're being harassed by someone when you're the one facing federal fraud charges. In fact, we'll probably need you to testify as a victim witness when this goes to trial." After hanging up with Amanda, Rebecca's first call was to her parents. Carmen answered on the second ring, and when Rebecca delivered the news, she could hear her mother crying with relief on the other end of the line. "Mija, we never doubted you," Carmen said through her tears. "But seeing you go through this, watching that woman try to destroy you, it broke my heart." "It's not over yet, Mama," Rebecca cautioned. "There's still going to be a trial, and I don't know what this means for me and David." "David," Miguel's voice came through the background as he took the phone from his wife. "That boy needs to understand what kind of woman his mother really is, and he needs to decide if he's going to be a man who protects his wife or a child who hides behind his mother's skirts." Rebecca's second call was to her boss, Jennifer Walsh. She'd been dreading this conversation, knowing that the police investigation and her time away from work had created exactly the kind of professional disruption Jennifer had warned her about. "Rebecca," Jennifer's voice was warm but serious, "I heard about the arrest this morning. Are you okay?" "I'm processing everything," she admitted, "and I want to apologize for the disruption this has caused at work. I know you were concerned about personal drama affecting my professional performance." "Rebecca, stop right there," Jennifer interrupted. "What happened to you wasn't personal drama. You were the victim of a sophisticated fraud scheme. There's a difference between someone who can't handle their personal life and someone who's been targeted by criminals. I appreciate that, but let me finish. What you did, fighting back when everyone told you to give up, uncovering evidence that law enforcement professionals missed, building a case that's now resulted in federal charges, that took intelligence, determination, and courage. Those are exactly the qualities I want in my senior staff." Rebecca felt tears welling up in her eyes. Senior staff? We'll discuss the details when you're ready to come back to work. But Rebecca, this experience has shown me that you have leadership qualities I hadn't fully recognized before. You don't back down from challenges, even when the odds are stacked against you. The call that Rebecca was most nervous about came that afternoon. David's name appeared on her phone screen, and she hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Becca?" His voice was hollow, devastated. "I just heard about my mother's arrest. The FBI agents came to my parents' house this morning. They had search warrants, boxes of evidence." "David, I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "Are you?" His question was sharp, because part of me wonders if you're enjoying this, seeing her arrested, seeing everything fall apart. Rebecca felt a flash of anger. Even now, after everything that had happened, David was more concerned about his mother's humiliation than about what his wife had endured. "David, your mother tried to destroy our marriage. She kept detailed files on me, studying me like I was a target to be eliminated. She's done this to 17 other couples. She took money from wealthy families to break up their children's relationships. This isn't about revenge. This is about justice." Silence stretched across the phone line for nearly a minute. "I don't know how to process this," David finally said. "My whole life, my mom she's always protected me, always made sure I had the best of everything. The idea that she was hurting other people, hurting you—" "She wasn't protecting you, David. She was controlling you. There's a difference." "But why? Why would she do this to us? I thought you liked me." Rebecca had been thinking about this question since Amanda Richards had described Linda's psychological profile files. "I think she saw me as competition for your attention and loyalty, and maybe she saw our marriage as the beginning of you building a life that didn't revolve around her anymore. So she decided to destroy it." "She decided to try. But David, she didn't succeed. We're still married. Our marriage license is valid and legal. The question is whether we're going to fight for our relationship or let her sabotage win, even after she's been arrested." Another long pause. "I don't know how to do this," David admitted. "Fight for us, I mean. My whole life, whenever there was a conflict, my mom handled it. She fixed problems, managed situations, made sure everything worked out in my favor. I don't know how to be married to someone strong enough to fight their own battles." Rebecca felt something shift inside her chest. This was the most honest thing David had said to her since their wedding day, and it revealed something she'd never fully understood about their relationship. "David, I don't need you to fight my battles. I can do that myself, obviously, but I need you to support me when I'm fighting them. I need you to trust me enough to believe me when I tell you something is wrong, even if it's hard to accept. Like when you told me my mother sabotaged our wedding. Like when I told you your mother sabotaged our wedding, you asked me to prove it, but you didn't really want me to prove it. You wanted me to be wrong, so you wouldn't have to choose between us." "You're right," David said quietly, "and I'm sorry. I was a coward. I let you face this alone when I should have been standing beside you. The question is, David, what happens now? Because I can't go back to the way things were. I can't be the wife who keeps quiet to avoid making waves. I can't pretend that everything is fine when it's not." "I don't want you to go back to the way things were," David said, and for the first time since their wedding day, his voice carried conviction. "I fell in love with you because you were smart and strong and independent. But somewhere along the way, I started expecting you to be small and accommodating, like my mom always was with my dad." "Your mom was never small and accommodating, David. She was manipulative and controlling. She just did it in ways that looked like traditional femininity. I'm starting to understand that, and I'm starting to understand that the woman I married is someone who fights back when she's attacked, someone who doesn't give up when everyone tells her she's wrong, someone who can uncover federal crimes when law enforcement professionals miss them." Rebecca felt hope stirring in her chest for the first time since David had moved out. "So what do you want to do?" she asked. "I want to come home. I want to go to counseling together. I want to learn how to be married to someone as strong as you are. And I want to figure out how to rebuild our relationship on honest foundations instead of the fantasy version my mother created. As Rebecca hung up the phone, she realized that Linda Chen's sabotage had failed in the most fundamental way possible. Instead of destroying Rebecca's marriage, it had forced both Rebecca and David to confront who they really were and what they really wanted from their relationship. Linda intended to prove that Rebecca wasn't good enough for David. Instead, she'd proven that David needed to become good enough for Rebecca.
6 months later, Rebecca stood in the same courthouse where Linda Chen had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy. But today, Rebecca wasn't there as a victim witness. She was there as the newly appointed Director of Victim Advocacy for the Arizona Attorney General's office, accompanying a young woman whose own wedding had been sabotaged by a similar fraud scheme. The transformation had been gradual but profound. What started as Rebecca fighting to save her own marriage had evolved into a career dedicated to helping others navigate complex fraud cases and institutional manipulation. Amanda Richards had personally recruited Rebecca after watching her methodical approach to building the case against Linda. "You have an instinct for this work," Amanda had explained during Rebecca's interview. "You understand how these sophisticated fraud schemes operate because you've lived through one. And more importantly, you don't give up when powerful people try to make you disappear." Rebecca's new role came with a significant salary increase, expanded responsibilities, and the respect that came with being one of the youngest senior staff members in the Attorney General's office. But the professional success, while gratifying, wasn't the most important transformation in her life. The real change was in their marriage to David. They had spent 4 months in intensive couples counseling with Dr. Patricia Vance, a therapist who specialized in helping couples recover from family of origin trauma. The process had been painful, with sessions where they'd had to confront years of unspoken resentments and unhealthy patterns. "David," Dr. Vance had said during one particularly difficult session, "you were raised by a woman who taught you that love means control and that healthy relationships require one person to be dominant and the other to be submissive. Your mother didn't model partnership, she modeled manipulation. And Rebecca," she'd continued, "you were so focused on being the perfect daughter-in-law and wife that you started shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were too small for who you actually are." The breakthrough had come during their 3rd month of counseling when David finally read all of Linda's psychological profile files that the FBI had provided as evidence. Seeing his mother's clinical assessment of Rebecca, her weaknesses to exploit, her pressure points for manipulation, her likelihood of backing down under sustained attack, had shattered his remaining illusions about Linda's motivations. "She didn't see you as a person," David had said that night, crying for the first time since their running day. "She saw you as an obstacle to overcome, and I let her. I watched her study you like a predator studies prey, and I told myself it was because she cared about our family." Rebecca had held him as he grieved not just the loss of his relationship with his mother, but the loss of his understanding of who his mother actually was. "The hardest part," David had told Dr. Vance, "is realizing that she probably never loved me the way I thought she did, because people who truly love you don't destroy the people you love. They don't turn your wedding day into a weapon." Now, 6 months later, Rebecca and David's relationship bore little resemblance to their pre-wedding dynamic. They were partners in the truest sense, 2 strong people who supported each other's goals and challenged each other to grow. David had left his accounting job to start his own consulting firm, specializing in financial fraud detection. His experience living through Linda's schemes had given him unique insights into how financial manipulation worked, and his natural attention to detail made him excellent at spotting irregularities that others missed. "I spent my whole life being protected from conflict, but I don't want to be protected anymore. I want to be useful. I want to fight alongside you, not hide behind you." Their apartment had been transformed too. Where once everything had been carefully coordinated and predictable, now their home reflected two people with strong opinions and individual tastes. Rebecca's case files occupied one corner of their dining table, while David's client folders spread across the kitchen island. They'd learned to navigate each other's work stress and celebrate each other's victories. The most visible symbol of their transformation was hanging on their living room wall, a new wedding photo, taken during a small ceremony they'd held 3 months after Linda's sentencing. This time, only their closest family and friends had been invited. This time, Rebecca had worn a dress she'd chosen herself, a simple but elegant sheath that felt authentically hers, rather than like a costume designed to please others. This time, the ceremony had been about them, not about managing other people's expectations. Rebecca's relationship with her own family had deepened as well. Miguel and Carmen had watched their daughter discover her own strength and were proud of the woman she had become, but they'd also learned something important about themselves.
"We raised you to be respectful and accommodating," Carmen had said during one of their weekly dinners. "But we should have also raised you to be fierce when necessary. We should have taught you that sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is refuse to accept disrespect." Carlos had become Rebecca's unofficial research partner, helping her investigate fraud cases and track down evidence for the victims she now advocated for. His tech skills and her legal training made them an effective team, and Carlos had discovered a talent for investigative work that was leading him toward a career in cybersecurity. "Linda Chen made a mistake when she decided to target our family," Carlos had said during Linda's sentencing hearing. "She thought Rebecca would be easy to intimidate because she was young and from a working-class background. But she didn't understand that our family doesn't back down from fights that matter." The ripple effects of Linda's exposure had been significant throughout Phoenix's wedding industry. 3 other wedding consultants had been arrested for similar schemes, and new regulations had been implemented to prevent vendors from having unsupervised access to government marriage license systems. Rebecca had testified before the Arizona state legislature about the need for stronger consumer protections in the wedding industry, and her recommendations had been incorporated into new legislation that was being considered by other states as a model for reform. "What you uncovered wasn't just one woman's criminal behavior," State Senator Maria Gonzalez had told Rebecca after her testimony. "You exposed systemic vulnerabilities that were being exploited to harm vulnerable couples across the entire Southwest." The 17 couples who had been victimized by Linda's schemes had each received financial restitution from the criminal case, but more importantly, they had received validation that their experiences had been real and their instincts had been correct. Jessica Thompson, the bride whose wedding had been sabotaged in 2022, had reached out to Rebecca the previous month with an unexpected piece of news. "I wanted you to know that Tom and I are getting remarried next spring. After Linda's arrest, we started talking again about what really happened to us. We realized that we'd let her destroy something real because we believed her lies about each other." "That's wonderful," Rebecca had replied. "Are you nervous about planning another wedding?" "Actually, we were hoping you might be willing to help us navigate the process. We trust you to spot any problems before they become disasters." Rebecca had started informally helping other couples who were worried about potential wedding fraud or family interference. Word had spread through Phoenix's wedding community that Rebecca Martinez Chen was someone who could identify red flags and protect couples from manipulation. It wasn't a formal business yet, but Rebecca was beginning to think about how she might expand her victim advocacy work to include preventative services for couples who wanted to protect their weddings from sabotage. Standing in the courthouse that afternoon, waiting for her current client's case to be called, Rebecca reflected on how completely her life had changed since that March evening when Linda Chen had stood up at her wedding reception. She was no longer the accommodating young woman who planned her life around other people's expectations. She was no longer afraid of conflict or worried about appearing difficult. She had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is fight for what matters, even when fighting is hard. Her marriage was stronger than it had ever been, built on honesty rather than harmony, on mutual respect rather than traditional roles. Her career was fulfilling in ways she'd never imagined possible. Her family relationships were deeper and more authentic.
Most importantly, Rebecca had discovered something about herself that she'd never known before Linda's attack. She was someone who could face down powerful people who tried to destroy her, and she could win. As she walked out of the courthouse that evening, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Dinner is ready when you get home. Can't wait to hear how your case went today." She smiled, thinking about the evening ahead, sharing stories about their work, making plans for the weekend, being partners in every sense of the word. Linda Chen had intended to prove that Rebecca wasn't worthy of the life she'd built. Instead, she'd forced Rebecca to become worthy of even more than she'd ever dreamed possible. The attempted destruction had become the foundation for a completely authentic life, and Rebecca Martinez Chen had never been happier to be exactly who she was.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.